Oh, and welcome everybody. We're going to give everyone from the waiting room a minute or two to get in here while I give us a quick welcome and introduction to who RTZ Hope is. My name is Erin Sricharoon, and I am a grant writer for RTZ Hope, but more importantly, storytelling is my passion and something that I am just so thrilled to be able to help facilitate on behalf of the organization. I want to welcome you to our community conversation event, Fatherhood Stories on Loss. This is in partnership with the one we did last month on Motherhood Stories on Loss, and I am so thrilled that we get to hear from the fathers today. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about our organization for any of you that might be joining us for the first time. The mission of Return to Zero Hope is to offer hope and healing to those impacted by pregnancy and infant loss through genuine connection, holistic support, inclusive resources, and grief-informed education. We offer direct services and resources to bereaved parents while also providing support and educational materials to providers. We invite you to visit our website to access a host of resources, support group offerings, and educational material. As part of our commitment to engaging a global community of bereaved parents and providers, this event is provided for free in part by generous donations from our supporters, including those in the Lighthouse program, our monthly donor program, which we are so grateful for. If you can, please consider supporting this event with a donation of $15 through our website. I'll put the link in the chat in a little while. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. We are hoping to model what is authentic, difficult, and intimate conversation, and so therefore we're trying not to interrupt the event. Please put yourself on mute and hold questions until the end. We do encourage you, though, to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know a little bit about you, why you're listening in, your connection to this event, and please post any questions during the event into the chat. We will try to make sure they get answered at the very end. Or if we don't have time for that, we will ask each panelist to answer them via email, and a recording of the conversation plus the answers to all of those questions will be sent out via email to anyone who registered. We also understand that this conversation may generate the need for support in real time for some listeners. If you need support at any time during this conversation, please reach out to Betsy Winter on our staff via email, Betsy at rtzhope.org, and I will put that in the chat as well. It is now my true pleasure to introduce our panel. I'm honored that they have agreed to share their stories and perspectives today. We will be exploring the various experiences of pregnancy and infant loss through the father's lens. We hope this brings the topic out to the light through the stories of each of our panelists. A special thank you to Rob, who will be facilitating our conversation today. Our first panelist, Evan, is a proud father of 3. He's married to a strong, intelligent, and absolutely beautiful woman, Marie. Evan is a professor of physical therapy, a researcher, and an avid surfer. He enjoys the sunshine and water nearly as much as he loves his family. Sadly, however, Evan and Marie are navigating life after having lost a son. Joseph Angelo was born prematurely in February of 2021, only to live a few short hours. Thankfully, doctors were able to save Marie through emergency surgery, yet the trauma and grief of that evening weighs heavy to this day. Now, each day brings something new as they seek to leave a meaningful life in the face of immeasurable loss, and I will let Evan tell much more of his story. Thank you for being here, Evan. Michael is a devoted middle school counselor, passionate educator, and compassionate advocate for mental health and healing. As a bereaved father, Michael has transformed his own journey of grief into a mission of support and uplift other fathers navigating similar pain. Outside of his professional and advocacy work, Michael finds joy and grounding in time spent with his wife and their living son. In every space he enters, whether it's a school hallway or grief support group, Michael Woods leads with authenticity, empathy, and purpose. And Michael, as a former educator, thank you for all you do in both spaces. We're so privileged to have you here. Stanley is the father to Lucas, who was stillborn September 25th, 2022. Stanley is also the father to his rainbow baby, Raya. In addition to being a member of the Sad Dads Club community, he also serves as a board member and vice chair of the Butterfly Support Network, a Canadian-based nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting people and families who have experienced infertility, pregnancy, and infant loss. Stanley, thank you so much for your story and your courage to be here. Rob is a musician, father, husband, and executive director, co-founder of Sad Dads Club. He currently lives in Maine with his wife and their rainbow baby and now 5-year-old son. Rob and their firstborn, Lila, was delivered stillborn at 38 weeks. He's the co-founder of Sad Dads Club alongside Jay, Bella's dad, and Chris, Izzy's dad, as a way for fathers to connect and support one another through the unique complexities of infant and child loss from a father's perspective. We're going to put more information about Sad Dads Club on there, and we're so grateful for Rob for not only starting this and sharing his story, but also being willing to facilitate today's conversation. So with that, I turn it over to Rob. And again, say thank you to all of you for being here.
Thank you so much, Erin, and a special shout out to RTZ Hope. I have a particular affinity for this organization, for the nonprofit, for the community that you all facilitate and nurture, and I just really appreciate, and I know I speak on behalf of Mike, Stanley, and Evan when I say that it's really important and special in a unique way to be able to hear a father's perspective when it comes to loss. Usually, or rather historically, traditionally, we have been made to think that men should be strong and that being strong is defined by being unwavering in your emotional state and that you are unaffected by things like trauma and loss. And that just is not a realistic expectation of any human being. So being able to have a space that empowers and actually illuminates the male perspective, I think is very important, and very glad to see more of that going on. And again, special shout out, just reiterate my appreciation, our appreciation for RTZ Hope. And a special shout out and appreciation to Mike, to Stanley, to Evan. Thank you three for joining me. These spaces are nothing if people don't show up and open their hearts and allow themselves to be vulnerable, to share a bit about what's going on. People aren't going to know otherwise, and we also aren't going to have an adequate space where we can celebrate, remember, and honor our children otherwise. So thank you three so much for joining me in this space. While I will be facilitating it, you three are making this happen. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I know that Erin gave us awesome introductions, but I would like to just give a chance for the four of us to go around and quickly introduce ourselves and reiterate maybe what had already been mentioned regarding our loss and what brought us here together. Glad we found one another, however unfortunate the circumstances are. My name is Rob. As Erin had mentioned, my daughter Lila, our forever firstborn, was delivered stillborn at 38 weeks after what can only be described as an completely normal, healthy, and textbook pregnancy. Everything was completely fine until then it wasn't. In that one moment on December 13th of 2017, when we went in for a 38-week ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. It was ruled to have been a placental abruption, but my wife had not experienced any pain, any bleeding. Nothing was abnormal, not even a noticeable decrease in fetal movement. So came as a complete shock and surprise to us that has completely changed our lives thereafter. I, as she mentioned, co-founded Sad Dads Club, which is a space that is there to help bereaved fathers navigate life after loss through both non-clinical and professional mental health support. With that, I would love to pass it on over to Mike.
Appreciate it, Rob. Hey, everybody. My name is Mike. I live in Glen Burnie, Maryland. I am a husband. I'm an educator. I'm a father. And so part of the reason why I'm here is because we lost our daughter, Avery, at 31 weeks. She was stillborn. Similar to Rob, it was due to placental abruption. Same thing, no bleeding. We did notice a lack of movement, and that's what kind of prompted us to go to the hospital, where we found out that our daughter didn't have a heartbeat. And so after 4 pregnancies, we were able to conceive and have our living son, Julian. So I enjoy spending time with him, but also continuing to keep my daughter's name alive. My son knows about my daughter. He knows her name. And part of my job as Avery's dad is to make sure that other people know her name too. So I'm glad to be in a space. I'm glad to talk to other people who've experienced the same thing, or want to know about what it's like for dads in this space. And so I'm going to continue sharing my daughter's story so that her name can live on, but also so we can provide support for other dads that are feeling the same thing. So thank y'all for the time. I appreciate being here. And then I'll kick it back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that. I'd love to now pass it over to Evan for a little intro in his own words.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'm Evan from St. Augustine, Florida. I'm also an educator. And I find myself here just trying to, live through my son and help his memory forge on. And Joseph Angelo, he would want me to be here. And so I'm here representing him and trying to help the other dads who, find themselves unfortunately in this difficult position. So through the conversation today, I hope to just be able to share some things that I've learned, both good things and bad things, and maybe even talk about some difficult things that, some other conversations won't let you have. So, yeah, I'm just really honored to be here to represent Joseph.
Thank you so much, Evan. Really glad you're here to honor Joseph. All right, now in your own words, Stanley, if you could just give us a bit of an intro, that would be wonderful.
Thanks, Rob. I'm Stanley. Lucas's dad. He was stillborn at 28 weeks. He was diagnosed with a life-threatening congenital seizure disorder. And my wife and I went through a very difficult experience of going through a termination for medical reasons. And we very much wish he was with us today. And now I'm trying to live my life, wondering what he's doing and where he is. I think about him as much as our living daughter, Rhea, except I can't hold him, I can't be with him, can't play with him, and trying to serve his memory with you all here today, and very much grateful and humbled to be among you all here to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stanley. You, as well as Mike and Evan, you all do a lot to honor your children, and showing up here is just one of many ways that you do that, keeping them in your hearts, keeping them front of mind. Talking about them to any living children that you have is all part of the ways that we find creatively, in a way that we wish we didn't have to, but to keep them here with us in any way that we can. And as you said, Stanley, you wish Lucas was still here today. I think that's one common misconception, that people just think you get over grief, that grief is something that has a timeline, or a time limit is maybe a better way to summarize it, and it just doesn't. Every single day without them, regardless of if it's a milestone, an anniversary is a day without them. You're missing milestones when you're missing moments with them. And that continues for the rest of our time on Earth. We are here to talk about grief. And often it has not been talked about how dads experience grief, what that experience is like, and more specifically and granularly, how does that differ from the grief that your partner is experiencing? And this can obviously all be unique to each couple's situation, to circumstance. But I'd love to open the floor and just hear a little bit about, more in depth and more detail, kind of like the visceral picture of what your grief experience was like. And then I think that leads into, how did you notice that differed from what your partner was going through? How did that conflict? How did it align? What were those experiences like? But starting with your own and how you experienced grief, whether it was immediate, was it delayed? Was it numbness at first in general? I mean, it's such a complicated thing that is in such a simple presented word. Everybody knows what grief means, but not everybody knows what grief feels like. And it can be even harder to describe. And by no means do we have to do it succinctly here. But I would love to open the floor and just hear about, in more detail, your grief experience, and then how it did or didn't differ from your partner's.
For sure. So for me and my wife, I remember going back to that day. So going to the hospital, and I remember when the doctor told us that there was no heartbeat. And so like my wife immediately breaks down in tears. Um, and I think I was in shock. Right. So we talked about different. So my wife was immediately sad, and I was not fully processing. I think I was talking to the doctor, trying to figure out like solutions, like what is next? What do we have to do? Because I wasn't really processing that this actually happened, right? And then as it started to sink in, it was more about like, how do I protect my wife, right? How do I protect the family? How do I make sure that she's good? Because not only do we get this devastating news that our baby is no longer here, but then we also get the news that my wife has to now deliver her. Um, And for me as the non-birthing parent, I'm like, that is crazy. Like that is the craziest like 1-2 punch ever. Is your baby's not here, you're gonna have to deliver her. And when you deliver her, there's not gonna be anything to make that first punch any lighter, right? Um, and so I just tried to make sure that I took care of my wife, because I felt like this was work that I couldn't do. I could support her in the delivery process, right? But I couldn't physically do anything to make it better. I couldn't make um, the news different. I couldn't make the delivery process. I couldn't put forth anything to help with that. I just had to support her. And so I took on my shoulders the weight of trying to protect my wife, trying to help her, because I knew that this was probably going to be the most challenging thing in the world. Um, and the same thing was true when we got home. When we got home, I took on a lot of stuff. Like I talked to all of the family and made sure everybody was good and made sure every inch of the house that was prepared for Avery was put away so that it wouldn't become a trigger for my wife, right? um, and kind of ignored how that felt for me in the moment, um, until I had the space where I could have some time away from my wife. So when I was in the shower, when I'm on another floor of the house, um, that's when I'm feeling my emotion. That's when I'm crying. That's when I was able to release. But I didn't necessarily do it in front of my wife, because I was worried about protecting her and making sure that she was good and that she was cared for. And so that came out in conversation too, because my wife is crying all the time and she doesn't see me crying at all. And she's like, do you feel sad? Like, are you upset about what's going on? Because she didn't see that, right? She wasn't there when I was in the shower crying or in the basement crying. Um, because all my attention was focused on how do I care for her now. Um, and so it was through our conversations that I realized that, one, that we were grieving differently, that there were times when she was sad and I was disappointed, that there was times when she was devastated and I was protecting. But it also let me know that that's something that, an area where I could work on, where my wife needed to see me grieve, that she needed to know that there were, feelings that I had that I wasn't just keeping to myself, that I needed to share with her. And honestly, me sharing those feelings with her has probably been one of the best things for us, post this experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mike.
Man, that's so sad. I'm so sorry for you. Like, just hearing you talk and comparing our situations, like that 1-2 punch that you talk about is just it's awful. I didn't have that same 1-2 punch. I had it in a different way. Um, but so if I'm thinking about how I process grief differently, it's really situational. But for me and my wife, it was a different kind of 1-2 punch. I was more traumatized and shocked, and I retreated. I was sad, but I wasn't given space to really be with the sadness because I think we were, and due to our situation, we were really just trying to figure out who was going to live. Um, 4 years ago, over 4 years ago, my son was born, I think right around 24 weeks, which is too early. They won't have any medical intervention to try to save the baby at that point, but we still had to go through with delivery, emergent delivery, which we knew he was going to die. They weren't going to save him. They were just going to let him pass. And if he was with us for however long, we would just cherish that. But my wife had to deliver him and then she hemorrhaged. So she wasn't part of the the sorrow that came right after delivering a live baby. That is so lucky. I'm so lucky to have had that time with him now, but my 1-2 punch was a little bit different because I knew we were going to deliver our child and lose our child, but then I didn't know we were going to potentially almost lose Marie due to hemorrhage. And so after we have our baby, they rush her out to go save her, and I'm alone And so my 1-2 punch was really like now having a child that I'm watching actively die and hoping my wife isn't actively dying in the OR, hoping that they'll wheel her back in. And so that kind of trauma really put us on two different trajectories for how to deal with the grief of losing a child. And it's so interesting how it hits men differently. And I know that's why we're here to really talk about that today. Hearing you talk about your situation, really, like I feel it. Like I feel it in my body because I can't imagine having not had that time with Joseph. Um, and so, yeah, it's just awful having to process that and not have really a healthy space to process it. Being a little bit more traumatized led me to kind of compartmentalize my grief and tuck it away because like you did, Michael, you were like focus on the house and focus on your wife and making things right and being like kind of being a pillar for your family upon which they could rely. And so you're kind of consumed with those duties and your grief gets tucked aside and you don't really ever get to wrestle with it. There's only really one way through that kind of a grief and you have to meet it head on and you got to be willing to take the gloves off and wrestle with it. Yeah, so I admire your bravery in sharing that. I mean that's hearing your story really, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, hearing your two stories, like for me, it was I had a pre-existing diagnosis of PTSD for something unrelated. So I knew somehow like I needed to do something about this. Like there's just no way that the pre-existing PTSD and losing Lucas wasn't gonna interact with each other somehow. And all I wanted to do was talk about it. Like I just I knew I needed to. I knew I wanted to. I felt it within me, but there was just all these weird like subtle interactions with people that like made it feel like it was wrong to do it. Like I was doing something wrong. Like trying to put my own feelings ahead. It was just like the first few instances were just like at the hospital when we were going through all the termination procedures, like only like two healthcare providers even like looked me in the eye and asked me how I was doing, right? Like it almost seemed like, that like I'm not the one experiencing this. And then when I went home, like there were some people telling me that like, oh, you got to be strong for Kelsey, right? And that they probably didn't mean it this way, but what that told me is just like, oh, I'm not the priority. Like I'm not the one. Like I need to put my own self aside, even though like Kelsey and I have a really strong like co-supportive relationship. It kind of felt like I knew we were gonna support each other, but then it almost felt like I was doing something wrong for trying to put myself first. And because of that, it's just the difference was, I don't know, I just remember feeling so lonely and like even though I think people were trying to like help me and talk to me and some people like didn't know what to say, I think it was just like so lonely, and the fact that all I wanted to talk about it, and but I almost felt like I wasn't allowed to. There was like times where I felt like it was just bottling within me, and then when it came out, it almost came out just at Kelsey and in a not so healthy way, and it kind of exploded. And there are ways that all I want to do is talk about it, and then Kelsey was different, just different, like just not the same way. It didn't mean that we loved Lucas differently, but there was just a way that contrast just made me feel like so lonely, even though like Kelsey was there and like some of my family were there and my friends were there. It's just like I just remember feeling like the intensity of that was just so awful. And like we cried like before we went to bed. I remember crying lots, the two of us, and then just trying to find each other and support each other the way that we could. And then I had to learn and reconcile with, like, like, we're gonna grieve differently. And that was a struggle on its own, like just accepting that I want to talk about it. And then we go back to work, like, you just, not many people knew about my situation because I just started a new job. But and I just remember crying at work one time. I just had to hide in a meeting room and just trying to find outlets in ways that, like, I don't know, initially it just felt so like I'm just doing a disservice to, like, my wife and to others by trying to grieve until, like, it's almost like I had to be given permission. And that's what one of the counselors told me, like, that was just so different from what I was trying to do with my PTSD, which was trying to live live with those PTSD symptoms, and trying to, like, make it go away, right? Like, trying to solve that problem, make sure it goes away so that I can function. And then this one was just like, oh, the advice was to feel it, right? Like, that was just, the contrast of that was just so different. And then the expectations of what people around me were like just made it feel so wrong. And I don't know, it just felt really, really awful and lonely and just disturbed myself. Like, I don't know.
Stanley, I kind of share that. Hearing you talk about that, I'm glad you mentioned it, because everybody, like, I guess, as the guy in the situation, I didn't have the baby. I wasn't the mother losing the baby. I was the dad, just kind of like the passenger. Why should I be as upset? And everybody knows I'm the dad, but it wasn't really my baby yet, I guess, in their eyes. And they, and I'm generalizing, but a lot of people just told me to be strong, just like they told you, like, be strong for the family, be strong for yourself. You got to cope, you got to get through it, you got to toughen up. And it's, all those platitudes that people don't say with malicious intent, but end up hitting you just that way.
Mm-hmm.
They sting. I remember my dad, after, I was kind of going through the trauma, having my own little version of PTSD and waking up every night with night sweats and nightmares that left me on the floor in the fetal position crying. He told me point blank, be strong for your family. When I was literally at my weakest, most vulnerable, um, just just so vulnerable. Like, I needed help, and everyone around me is telling me just to, like, be strong, and it didn't give me the space to be in grief. And I'm not sure if it was just because I was a guy or the dad, and it shouldn't have been that way for me in their eyes, but it made me angry. It made me angry because of our
Yeah.
situation in particular. I was the one with Joseph. I spent his final breath with him. My wife didn't, unfortunately, but, like, I I wore that. I was cloaked in that. I should be
Mm-hmm.
able to grieve, and everyone's telling me not to. Or not telling me not to, but everyone's kind of encouraging me to be there more for her. And that just really made me feel more isolated and lonely, like you said, and that ended up leading to a lot of anger that built up inside of me. I was angry because we lost Joseph. I didn't know who to be angry at, but I was angry. Um, and then that also made me even more angry. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so glad that y'all are sharing these stories. This is, I know people are tuning in watching. This is good for me. Uh, I like that y'all both brought up that, like, people were telling y'all to be strong. I don't think anybody told me that as much as that was already, like, internalized. So, like, I just felt it. So nobody said, you got to be strong for your wife. I just, like, took that on like I have to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of the things that we did talk about, though, were like in the hospital before we even deliver Avery. So, like, we decided on three things. We decided that we were gonna stay married, because I was afraid that I would lose my wife after this. And I was like, can't lose my baby and my wife. So we decided we were going to stay married. We decided we have a big faith in God, and it kind of grounds us and shapes our life. And so we decided we were going to continue to keep our faith, because I didn't know what my life would look like without that. And then we also decided that we were going to go to counseling. As a counselor myself, I was like, I know I need this. But when I got home, I didn't feel like I could say some of those things to my wife, right? Because my wife is sharing all this stuff to me, and she's crying and she's upset, and all rightfully so. And I'm like, I don't want to add to that. I just didn't want to make a terrible situation worse, right? So I was like, I can't share some of these things with her. And not because I didn't want to, I just didn't want to make it worse. And so like we had to talk through that too. Like she wanted to hear those things. She wanted to know. 'Cause just like I wanted to protect her, she wanted to protect me too. Which is not something I was always thinking about. Um, but she wanted to protect me too and my feelings and how I felt. And so um there was like this like testing stage where it's like, okay, she shares something and then let me share a little bit and see how this works, right? If I share this piece with her, is this really gonna make things worse, or is it gonna give me the opportunity to kind of share? Um, and it did, it gave me the opportunity to share more. Like she was open, it didn't make anything worse. In hindsight, it wasn't getting any worse at that point. Um, it was getting worse by me not sharing. So I was able to share some more with her, and then um, we both sought out counseling moving forward too. And then grateful for just the opportunity to get in community with other guys like you guys um, who walk this walk too. So yeah, definitely
I love
appreciate
that
y'all
you
for me
shared
that.
that, Michael. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um, I love that you shared that because I think of like the trajectory of our grief and healing process afterwards. And there was like kind of this precipice. And there was a point at which like I was retracting so much from our marriage due to the anger and the grief and the trauma and the loss and not coping with that properly. There was like this point at which I was going down this road of just like almost um uh, unwillingly and unknowingly kind of walking away from my family because of my grief. Not dealing with my grief was causing me to retract from my wife and my family. And we had a daughter who was 3.5 at the time, and I really needed to be there for both of them. And there was this point in time in which it was kind of like a do or die moment where we were probably about 6 months after losing Joseph, and I had not yet gone and had counseling or talked to a professional about it. And that was that was like a come to Jesus moment, if you will, where like I was either gonna go deal with this with a professional and get some real help and deal with these issues, or I was gonna go down a road of losing my wife, losing my family, uh, ending up isolated even further by myself. Who knows? Potentially even committing suicide. I mean, who knows? Um, and I made that decision, luckily, to go see some help based on what a friend said. And here I am today. We have another child, and we're healing, and we're living together, and we're gutting it out. Every day I wake up and think about Joseph, but we're still gutting it out. And I like that you kind of brought that perspective into it because it reminds me of when I had the opportunity to finally go get some help and I chose to do it. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life. I put it off for 6 months, but when I finally did, it's exactly what I needed.
I'm glad you said that because like when I say that part of like our story about like how we made this decision in the hospital, like people are always like, well, how did you make that decision? Like you're so strong to make that decision. And I just like I don't know what else to do. Right. So like all the things that you talked about, like I thought about too, right? Like I'm like, this is what could happen when we leave here. And I was so scared about what life would be like when I left that hospital. Right. Um, and so like I even like that you said that, it took 6 months because it puts it into perspective, right? That like this is not something that a decision you always make immediately. It's just like when you get to the point where you're like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I just know that I don't want to be in this space and I want to move forward. I know that I need some help somewhere. I think that's the important part, is reaching that place and then going to get the support that you need. And I just realized in that hospital room, I was like, I need help. I need more help than I can get right now.
Yeah.
So
And
I appreciate that.
I had like, so Kelsey and I saw a counselor pretty early. Like I saw a counselor pretty early because of, it was actually through Kelsey's like midwifery program. Like I wasn't a patient there. So then they kind of like registered me and I was able to see someone like pretty early, but it wasn't ongoing. And the fact that like I knew I needed something ongoing, and it took another like 3-4 months, and it took like Kelsey literally like sitting me down and was like, you're seeing this person, like it doesn't matter like if they have this qualification or whatever, like just go see this person. And it's kind of like I didn't really realize how much I had to say until like you just go in and you just start talking. I saw them like every 2 weeks, and you're just talking, and everything. Thanks for sharing about suicidal ideations, because like I also had that. I had that before with the PTSD, and I knew it was gonna creep up at some point, and you know, like sometimes I don't even know. I go into my appointments, I was like, oh, I'm not sure what to talk about, but there's stuff to like talk about, and then eventually like some of the suicidal thoughts like kind of came up and crept up that like were kind of hiding, and like I knew I needed to talk about it, because you know there are thoughts of me like, why don't I just join Lucas, you know, like this is so hard here, like he needs someone to parent him, and it's just so hard to parent him on Earthside that like sometimes I just thought like I just want to be with him, and like he must be like missing us, and you know, and it took some time to like realize like, well, my family needs me here too. Kelsey needs me here too, right? Like that's the only thing that's like keeping me alive. Like, and it took some time to kind of work some of that through, and you do need to talk to someone like professionally, I think. Like at least I needed to, because I knew how complicated like our situation was with my pre-existing mental health, and how involved the termination procedure is. Like, you know, we're supposed to be one protecting Lucas, and yet here we are like organizing a procedure that would like end his life, right? And like that's like so much guilt and so much just so much confusion that that like is just so painful, and I needed to make sure that I needed help to get that stuff through. And you know, like a lot of us, like Mike, you touched on it earlier, like just it's kind of like it reminds you of the helplessness of just being at the hospital throughout all this, and just to watch everything go down and not being able to like do anything about it. It just shattered like my whole identity of my role, like trying to like be the person that's trying to like protect Kelsey, protect Lucas. And it was just devastating of like what, and I was at the point where I was just finally getting into grips of my pre-existing PTSD diagnosis, and then this happened. It's just like I felt like I wasn't really my true self in there for Kelsey during that time, and once I felt like I was slowly creeping back into one of the best versions of me, like we lose Lucas, and it's just terrible to think that at that moment that I was gonna like drift away again, you know.
And what you have all mentioned examples of, or alluded to, or experienced is that you were grieving alone, or you were scared that you were grieving alone, or that you were doing it in an isolated area where you felt as though you either didn't have permission to do it in front of anyone else, people weren't checking in on you as much as they were checking on your partner, or you didn't feel as though you had the permission at all to do it. And so this feeling of isolation, this insularness becomes too overwhelming. which leads us to the next question that we've already actually gone into a bit, which is how do we find support before it becomes too overwhelming that we do anything that becomes, you know, heaven forbid, irreversible, or that hurts us or hurts those that we love. Because being alone in grief is something that I think a lot of men really do experience. And what becomes the point at which it is too overwhelming, it's too much to bear because it's too heavy to deal with alone, without any outlet, without any semblance of hope or any inspiration of support. So I think that I thank you all for being so open, for being so vulnerable, for letting it all actually out there about the weight of grieving alone, because I think that is the difference of how men grieve. It's alone, even just in not being checked on as much. You feel as though people don't care about you as much, or that you shouldn't feel it as much, and that maybe there's even something wrong with you if you're not over it, or you're not getting better, or you're not managing it more. But let's continue on this theme of like, how do men find support? What were the things that you guys use that help you, that were tools that gave you that sliver of relief, that marginal relief, even if it is minimal? That's huge in the landscape, in the abyss of grief, that you have this endless pit of pain at your fingertips at all times. I had the fortunate misfortune of having a friend of mine, one of my best friends from college who was local, 11 months earlier, have a stillborn daughter. I immediately had somebody that I could go to who understood. 7 months later, we were connected to another dad who had a stillborn daughter. We realized immediately the importance of having an outlet, of having that validation, of having a space where vulnerability was encouraged. We didn't have to over-explain ourselves, or we could say everything or nothing. And that for me was so immediately invaluable, because I had a community, albeit a small one, but that's all I needed, because then and there I wasn't alone. And my wife and I did grief counseling together, and that was huge. I'd never done professional counseling, and I'll never not do it for the rest of my life. This is a forever thing now. But I would just love to continue on this theme and this kind of generous offering that you guys have dived into, doesn't matter, that we've gone into about how do you find that support? How do men do it? How do you
I
feel
think,
confident and okay and encouraged and empowered to do so?
yeah, and I think like one of the, yeah, you mentioned having some friends, like unfortunate misfortune, and I think even though it didn't, like, it might not seem like much, but like I had some friends who I hadn't talked to in a long time, and like either they've experienced something similar, like recurrent miscarriages or um, infertility, or even or and a stillbirth of their own, or even like just working with people in their professional lives who they see this all the time, and they just come in and they just check in, and it just helped me feel like seen, like it's like just to even ask how I'm doing is acknowledging that like this is also happening to me. And I think like that is so powerful, like just even just letting me like ramble on a text. I think that was like just even they're what I how I put it is like they're willing to like stay in the moment with me and not jump ahead to like fix the problem that they thought I had. And it was all I wanted to do was just be in the moment and talk about Lucas. And a lot of times it felt like people were already looking for solutions for me that like quite frankly wasn't actually seeking to like get over the grief, right? Like it's not why I look out for friends at that time and like wanted to talk to friends. And one of the first things that I did find was Sad Dad's Club. I think it was like 3 weeks after Lucas died. Kelsey found an Instagram post about it, and then I thought like let's do it. Like I don't know what's gonna happen, but I don't know how many people are gonna be there. But I think the first call there were like 30 of us there, and it was amazing just to. I think I talked for like 15-20 minutes the first time I shared something, and it was like just nice to be heard by a group of people who were in a similar boat and just understood, and I didn't have to like explain so much. It was just the acceptance of being in that space, and the validation was just so powerful. Like even it helped a lot that friends were trying and some friends were just were asking and checking in and sending stuff, and like even just like giving some donations to help with our funeral, like even to think about that, like to you lose a child and you have to do all these administrative things too, is just but like the weight did feel less for when friends helped, but I think the most monumental day to day was finding community, and Sad Dads Club was that community for me, like really early on. So
I would
Yeah.
echo that. Not for the Sad Dads Club because I didn't find them until a couple of weeks ago, although they're wonderful. And for everybody on the call who's wondering, I think you got to get plugged in on Sad Dads Club. I wish I had known about it earlier, um, but I didn't. And the thing that I think of is the most, it just echoes what Stanley was talking about, is you feel so alone. You just need a space with other people to be with. You just need to be with other people. You're gonna feel alone. Your grief is gonna make you feel alone. You're gonna want to retreat to be alone. You're gonna want to go into a corner and hide all by yourself because that's the safest place that you think you could be, but it's not. And you really just need to surround yourself with like what Stanley was talking about. Just find a community like Sad Dads Club. um, for me, it was just a friend who randomly kept checking in on me and was, he's one of my best friends, going back all the way to college. And we just had a real raw, honest conversation one day that kind of kicked me in the right direction and started everything else. So community, talking, writing, just being with other people and not being afraid to share and just making sure you are not alone. Don't be alone. That is where the darkness can just consume you.
Yeah, I think both of y'all mentioned some great things. I'm part of Sad Dads community too. So, Evan, we're glad to have you. And yes, Stanley, you did talk for like 20, 30 minutes first time. But we all did, right? But I think like, and Evan, you just kind of said it too. Like, so one of the things, it's such a hard thing to do, but like how you find community is you got to share. Um, and that's really hard because a lot of guys experience it, they don't want to share, right? Or they don't feel like they can, or they don't know who to share with. My wife was like, I need to get this out. And she was like, I'm going to post about this on Instagram. And I was like, I don't think you should do that. I was like, that's not a good idea. We should do this a different way. We should think about it. And she was like, I don't care. I'm doing this for me. So I need to share because I need to get this out. And I was like, all right, if that's what you need, go ahead. So she started sharing and then she started tagging me in posts. And so that, which is cool. It's my wife, it's fine. She can share and tag me in posts, right? But that also like opened up like things in my like my For You page, right? It opened up stuff and allowed me to see things, which is how I found Sad Dads Club. But then like people would see us, like people that we knew would see us out, people at church or at work or whatever, who knew, what was going on. And a lot of people just came and started talking to us and sharing their own personal stories. And I'm like, people I've known for years that I never knew, had, children that were stillborn or miscarriages and all these things. And I'm like, man, all these years I've known you, I never knew this part of your story, right? And so we got a lot of encouragement, and that's what was helpful for us moving forward too. Like when we were um, after Avery and were pregnant with my son, that was hard. I'm like, how are we supposed to do pregnancy after loss, right? Like this is crazy. And what was helpful was some guys that I knew that had experienced the same thing. They had experienced loss, their wives got pregnant again. And so I was like, how do you manage this part? This is where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking. And so sharing is a hard thing to do. It's not easy at all, but it's so beneficial because you sharing allows you to connect with people um, that have either been there before or that are walking the same journey with you. And that's why like it's so important to be in community because nobody has to walk this journey alone. I know for us in the Sad Dads Club, we walk this journey together. And for all bereaved fathers, we walk this journey together. One thing we said this last night too, but like part of the benefit of being in community, especially with some people that might have been there before, is it allows you to see a future version of yourself. And so that's why guys keep showing up to that community, because there's hope there too. So where there's people share, find hope, and walk in community.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something like how hard, like part of how hard it is to share is it's because you're already so exhausted by the grief. And I just remember I had some people, like they're all good intentions, right? They're like, "Oh, you could have just messaged me. You could have just like," and I try to explain, like, I was so like devastatedly like tired and like exhausted from the grief that, like I just couldn't. And it sounded so silly because it was like and contradictory. It's like, oh, I needed support, but I'm not seeking it because I'm so tired of it. And then part of it was also like grappling with like, am I supposed to, right? Like, and it almost like just like adds oil to the fire, right? Like it's just because you're stewing in that isolation because you need it, but you're not looking for it. And then when you want it, like you're so tired to do it, and then it doesn't actually happen, and then you're tired of thinking about being tired to make that decision, and it's just and then that's where I think like when I'm so grateful for the people who just took a leap of faith of like messaging me and like not saying that the ones who didn't weren't thinking about me, or like I don't there's no like negativity towards those friends, but like the ones who did just who probably didn't know what to say or what to do, and they just asked, and I'm just so grateful for those people because it automatically gave me an outlet and invitation to speak about Lucas and to say his name. And I had a friend, she like even asked me like, oh, how was his pregnancy, like did he move a lot? And just being able to talk about him when he was alive was like I get so few opportunity to do that because like I wasn't the one carrying him, so I only know these experiences through Kelsey, and that is I cherish every moment that I've had like being with Kelsey while he was alive, right? And just even thinking about being able to have the opportunity to share that with people, and it's just so that support to talk about these moments that we're living, right? Like and maybe it's because people don't think that we're thinking about it anymore, or that like especially when Rhea was born, I don't know if people thought like, oh, now he's good, right? Like Stanley's good now, right? Like but it's almost no, I'm probably not worse, but like there's more stuff added on now that the fact that like Ray is here, and that's a whole other story about now. Like I'm trying to be a father to a rainbow baby at the same time of trying to be a father to Lucas, and complexities with that too. So, and trying to find support of people who understand that is very hard too.
What about professional mental health services? How did you all find those? What was most helpful? Because I think everybody did mention going in and finding clinical support. How did you find that?
I found it online, like I was so with my PTSD I had a particular psychologist with a particular training for a type of therapy, and I was really fixated on finding someone like that, and because of that it kind of delayed me finding somebody. And then eventually, like in Canada, like in British Columbia, there's just so few, like they're not few, there's just the demand is so high for psychologists that I just needed to find somebody who was available. And Kelsey, unfortunately, Kelsey had to like sit me down and say like, you can't delay this anymore. Like she just went on a website. I think she just Googled like psychologist Vancouver or something, and we just booked the person who was available. And I'm so grateful for that because it just I'm still seeing him, and it's been so helpful.
Yeah, I think I
Um,
found my therapist right afterwards through just like a quick Google or maybe on BetterHelp or something like that. Just it was such a time of desperation. I was just looking for anybody that seemed to meet the qualifications for a grief counselor. Um, but I'm not with that therapist anymore. I want to, make it clear that you need particular things from a therapist as a dad, a grieving dad, maybe even with PTSD and shock and everything else that you're dealing with as a grieving dad. So I've bounced around between a couple of therapists since then, and I've never really left therapy. I've always been doing it, which the consistency is key. Um, but really not being afraid to just find a new therapist, maybe somebody that you resonate better with. Find a therapist for sure, but if you go to them for a couple of weeks and you're just not connecting or you're not exploring topics deep enough or you're not feeling better about anything, that's time to switch and find a new therapist. Don't be afraid to do that. I've done that like 3 times, and now I'm with my therapist and have been with her for like a year. And I don't want to go to anybody else. Like our connection is solid, rock solid. And she helps me so much. Like, so yeah, find therapy, but don't be afraid to just get stuck with one therapist. I think that's maybe a common pitfall that somebody new to therapy might do.
yeah. So I think I think I was the one that mentioned it in the hospital. My wife was the first one to find a therapist. And so she found one online. She found a therapist here in Maryland, and so we looked into that for her. And then I was like, all right, I need to find somebody for myself. So we kind of um, looked into some therapists online. I found somebody else in the area. I had some things that were very specific to me that I wanted. For me as a black man, I wanted a black male therapist. I also wanted somebody who had experienced this before because I didn't feel like I wanted to hear I didn't want to hear from somebody who hadn't experienced what I went through, because I didn't feel like they would be able to speak to it. Um, as a counselor myself, I know the techniques and what needs to be done and all of that. So I wanted somebody that had some similarity in story, because I didn't want to walk myself through the counseling techniques that I already knew. So I signed up for this guy that I found that I thought would be really good, and he actually put me on to this woman. And I was like, I do not want to do this. So I was like, well, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see how, a session or two goes. And when I met her, she had everything that I was looking for. So she was of the same faith as I was. She had also experienced the loss of a child. So it was also really interesting to hear her perspective and for her to hear mine out. And so that was really good. And so I just continued to stay with her for quite a while to work through some of the things that I had for some of my mental health concerns. And then from there, just going into different support groups, as we've kind of mentioned before.
Thank you guys. We're right about that time, and I am as inspired as I always am when I have the privilege and honor of being in a space with other lost dads. I hate why we know each other, but I'm glad we found one another. Avery's dad, Lucas's dad, Joseph's dad. Thank you three so much for being so incredibly real, honest, raw, vulnerable, and overall helpful. That's what this is for. Sharing our experiences is going to help others feel less alone and know that what they are going through is not abnormal. And it's always this double-edged sword of like, oh, well, that's too bad. But it's so important that people know that. And thank you so much, RTZ Hope. You all continue to do remarkable work that is so profoundly impactful and healing and just transformative. And I really appreciate you all giving grieving fathers a space to share their experiences, share their stories in an effort to continually connect this lost community. Because overall, whether it's a lost mom or lost dad, we're all grieving the loss of a child. And being able to come into a space and be invited to share our experiences is absolutely invaluable to anybody out there who is watching, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for taking the time out. If you are a lost parent yourself, thank you so much for allowing us a space to tell some of our story. And if you're a medical professional, thank you for the work that you do to support those in their time of greatest need. It is unbelievable and it is so needed. And just thank you all very, very, very much.
Rob, we can't say thank you enough. Michael, Stanley, Evan, just echoing everything that you all said. I just read something that healing never happens in silence. And all of you saying that and sharing that, thank you for doing that. On behalf of RTZ, just again, our deepest appreciation. For those of you on the call, please, please, please check out Sad Dads Club if that is applicable to you or anyone you know in your life. If you're a professional, please use them as a resource. Also, RTZ has resources and support groups aimed at couples. So please, if you are looking for a support group where you can bring your partner to, we welcome those. And we have resources for dads on our website as well. So we hope to continue to support all of you along your journey to healing and hope, and also to be a resource for providers. So please reach out to us or to Sad Dads Club if you need any support. And thank you all again for this incredible work. Just a reminder, an email will be sent out with a replay link. We hope you share that replay link far and wide to those who might need it. And with that, I'm going to end the conversation and say thank you to all of you.